This week, I want you to say it with your chest. This week is really pivoting the energy from more summertime sadness and being emotional to a much more confident and much more brave situation. It's time to be bold, and I want you to start getting excited. So let's go ahead and get started talking about this week. Welcome back to the Astrology Report. My name is Cam White, and today we're talking about July 1st through July 7th of 2024. We are already halfway through the year. Welcome to July. We start this week off with the moon conjoining Mars in Taurus, and then it will make a sextile to Venus and make a sextile to Saturn. So the way I would describe this is there's going to be some frustrations and things will be slow, but enjoyable. Last week, I would have talked about Sunday having the moon in Taurus and feeling a little bit more relaxed, but Monday, it's Monday. You got to go back to work. You got to get things done, and things are not going to be moving at the pace that you want to. And there is a moment where when the moon conjoins Mars, where you're going to feel frustrated, where things aren't going as fast as you want to, or maybe you're trying to enjoy something like, again, the moon in Taurus just reminds me of like a charcuterie board picnic in the park. But the moon conjoining Mars is like, maybe you have like geese come up to you and they just eat all your food, or they like harass you or something like that. There's something unenjoyable or unpleasant or a disturbance that frustrates you. However, after the moon makes that conjunction to Mars, it's then going to make a sextile to Venus and then a sextile to Saturn. How can we laugh this off? How can we enjoy what we've got going on anyway? When I lived I'm from Southern California, but when I lived in LA for a year, before the pandemic, there was a lot of traffic. During the pandemic, half of what I did during the pandemic was literally just drive around at 115 miles an hour. Because if you lived in LA during the pandemic, there was no one on the freeway there, and I was just bored, so I was driving like 150 miles an hour all over the freeway just for something to do. Made it like all around from like, mid-city all the way to like Simi Valley, all the way back in like 45 minutes. It was great. But when you're in traffic, it's easy to get frustrated. Things aren't going slow. But people in Los Angeles and Southern California know that there's going to be traffic. And rather than getting mad about it, they just sit down, shut up, maybe listen to music, listen to a podcast, and try to enjoy the ride and be patient. So Monday, it is going to feel difficult to like have that initiative, but there's going to be things that are moving slow, but there is an opportunity to still enjoy the ride. Then we get to Tuesday. There is so much going on Tuesday. Be ready, okay? The moon will be in Taurus, and it's going to conjoin Uranus, and then it's going to sextile Neptune. Then we have our first highlight, which there's a few highlights on Tuesday. Mercury at the very end of Cancer is going to make a trine to Neptune, okay? Then immediately after that, like 5 minutes after that, Neptune stations retrograde. That's also another highlight. Then right after that, the moon will enter Gemini. It will sextile Mercury and trine Pluto. And how is it sextiling Mercury? Well, the next highlight that we have is Mercury ingresses into Leo. And Mercury ingresses into Leo like literally within the hour of the moon entering Gemini. So it's technically Mercury enters Leo first, then the moon enters Gemini, and then the moon will sextile Mercury. And then the other highlight that we have is Venus making a trine to Saturn. So we have 4 highlights going on Tuesday. That's quite a bit going on. The way I would describe this in like an order of the transits is there's going to be something disrupting going on. That's the moon conjoining Uranus, right? But then there's this spark of creativity and inspiration. The moon makes this sextile to Neptune. So maybe this moon conjoining Uranus, while it is disrupting, is good. Because after the moon separates from Uranus, it sextiles Neptune, where it's like, oh, well, now that this is different, how can I see this in a different perspective? Is there any opportunity here? Then, and that's also added on with Mercury making a trine to Neptune. Mercury is about our ideas and logic and rationale, and it's trining Neptune. It's kind of like, whoa, like there is a creative inspiration here. There is some sort of vision. There is some sort of idealized, romanticized way of looking at things that might help us in our sense of being more logical, being more rational about things. Like Neptune, for example, you could be logical and rational, but if you're stone cold sober, it might be difficult to be creative versus like, again, enough with the drug analogies, Cameron, I know. But like if you're like on alcohol or drugs or whatever, it's like you can have like a rational thought that, or I should say, you can have a rational idea, but it is inspired by something that is not rational. It is inspired by a different way of seeing things. That's how I look at Mercury trining Neptune. So then Neptune goes retrograde. There is a change in the vision. There is a change in the way that we are perceiving things. That could be good or bad. For example, I will say the one time it is appropriate to use psychedelic analogies is with Neptune, okay? And if Neptune goes retrograde, so if Neptune is idealism, vision, there's creative, spiritual implications with Neptune. It's very romanticized, like with rose-colored glasses. When that changes retrograde, that is like if you did let's say a mushroom trip or LSD trip. there are certain people that have a bad reaction to that. And they're like, oh my God, I see things different and I don't want to see it that way again. And there's other people, like let's say you're a tech bro in like, Simi Valley, or I should say Silicon Valley. You do ayahuasca for the first time. And for the first time in your life, your brain opens up to something other than code. And that has inspired a lot of people. And that's how I look at Neptune going retrograde, is like, oh, the way that we're seeing things, the way that we thought the world worked, the illusion that we saw that the world worked is changing. Because that's the thing. Neptune's all about illusion. And it gets complicated with Neptune and Pisces because Saturn is in Pisces right now. So the planet of illusion is right next to the planet of like reality. And they're 10 degrees away. And we're getting closer and closer to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. I have made so many videos on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. It is so important for 2025 and 2026. But as they're 10 degrees away, this question of like, okay, what is real right now and what is an illusion? What am I actually need to be serious about versus what am I being confused about? Saturn just went retrograde and now Neptune's going to go retrograde. So like what is real and what we have to do just kind of got a little bit more in our face. But now Neptune, what we thought was real, what we thought was an illusion, all of that kind of changes too. But Mercury then going in to Leo is sparking new ideas. There is this idea, there's this inspiration. Mercury going to Leo is very bold, it's very confident. And if Mercury is about our mind and our thoughts, there is just a lot of like this confidence with it. And so I'm going to argue that this Neptune retrograde is good. I like that Mercury trines Neptune where it's like, whoa, let me, see things differently. And then Mercury goes into Leo where I feel brave. I feel confident. I'm going to say it with my chest. And then we have Venus trining Saturn, and that's just enjoying what is important to us. Like something that was really interesting about the pandemic was how much people got involved with, or people were really forced to look at what is important to them. What is their purpose? What are they doing with their lives? And that Venus in Cancer trining Saturn and Pisces is that Venus is enjoying and pleasure and fun, and she's in Cancer. So there's this protective and nurturing aspect to it, but she's trining Saturn. Venus-Saturn connections are great. Venus and Saturn have a very good relationship in a lot of cases when it comes to their triplicity and what signs they rule. But Venus making that trine to Saturn is like, I'm going to have fun with something, but it's going to be the things that are important to me. It's going to be the things that I take really seriously. It's going to be the things that might take a little while to achieve, but it's fun on the way. There's so much, I can't emphasize enough how much the vibe changes on Tuesday. And I like this. I want you to go with the roller coaster of emotions. And if we add on to that, the moon, again, will conjoin Uranus, there's a disruption. Then the moon sextiles Neptune, right as Mercury trines Neptune. We're going like, whoa, we're seeing things differently. But then the moon goes into Gemini. This is adding on top of Mercury and Leo. So moon is in Mercury's sign. Mercury then goes into Leo. They sextile each other. There's all of this like, well, I'm going to do this now and I'm going to do that now. It's like, for example, for people that have had a ayahuasca trip or a very spiritual, psychedelic experience, they get all of this inspiration. They have all these new ideas. They quit their job. They break up with their wife and then they start a new business or they go into the mountains somewhere, retreat. That's the vibe on Tuesday. And the moon, after it sextiles Mercury, will actually make a trine to Pluto. There's something really empowering about this. This is different. This is a vibe shift. And I know I say vibe shift a lot, but this, in my opinion, it just has so much going on. And it's all stuff that is very, again, Saturn's already retrograde. Yes, Neptune goes retrograde, which is an outer planet, but it's like the moon's making all of these adjustments. Mercury's making all of these adjustments. And I just think mentally we're in a different situation by the time we end Tuesday. And then we get to Wednesday. Wednesday adds on top of that. There's a lot more ideas. There's a lot more inspiration, but we will be struggling with opposing forces on what to do. And a lot of Wednesday is going to be about weeding out what is important and what's not important. And that's because on Wednesday, we will have the moon making a conjunction to Jupiter. That's that part where we're going to have a lot more ideas, a lot more inspiration, making a lot more communications in our day-to-day life, seeing things in a different perspective. But the highlight that we have going on Wednesday is Mercury is going to go opposite Pluto. This is that part where we're having those opposing forces. Pluto is power, fear, corruption, all that kind of good stuff. But with Mercury being about our minds, and it's in Leo where it's about like authenticity and bravery and just being bold and just saying it how it is. Like I have Mercury in Leo with my sun in Leo, and just something I always say to like everything is like, it just is what it is. It is what it is. I ain't going to think about it. I'm not going to question it. I'd rather just keep rolling. But Mercury going opposite Pluto is our minds being more fixated again on like authenticity and it is what it is and just being bold and being brave. But as it goes opposite Pluto, it's not that simple. there is this like, there's an opposing force that doesn't want you to think that way. There's this opposing force that doesn't want you to be bold or be brave or be confident. That might be yourself. That might be your parents. That might be your relationship. I don't know what that is. You're going to have to look at your chart. But Pluto is, again, like this overwhelming power that might make us more fearful. And it might be something really small that we're exaggerating. Or the other way to look at Pluto is there might be this really, really big force that we can just make really, really tiny and make it go away. But then we also have the moon in Gemini. After it makes that conjunction to Jupiter, we have all these ideas, we have all this inspiration. The moon's going to make a square to Saturn. And that's why I said this is the time to really weed out the ideas and really focus on what is important. Because again, with the moon conjoining Jupiter and Gemini, we will have a total abundance of ideas and plans and which ways to go and a lot of data. But the moon squaring Saturn is like, okay, how much of this data is actually usable? I think most people have actually seen that YouTube video. It's like how to lie with statistics. When it comes to data can be augmented or twisted in a way that seems legitimate, but it isn't. And so I like Jupiter and Gemini is like, here's all of the data, here's all of the information. And the moon just making that conjunction, connecting to Jupiter is gaining all of that. But the moon squaring Saturn is knowing like, okay, well, what's real and what's not here? What do I actually use out of all of this? What is actually usable? And I think I said this on the last week or maybe the week before, something along the lines of like, you have all these ideas, but maybe take a moment to figure out which ones are worth pursuing. That's the same thing with the moon and Gemini making a square to Saturn. What, you might have, like, for example, you might want to start, a restaurant, but then you also want to go to a different country, but you also want to write this book. And there's all these different things. And it's like, you have all this creative inspiration. Let's focus it. What is really actually important here? What are you actually going to regret not getting done? What do you actually, with all this information, all this inspiration, where can we concentrate? It's going to be easy to get distracted by all of the, rosy colors and all of the glitter and glamour, but we have to kind of concentrate it down on Wednesday. And I think that will be a little bit difficult because we're going to be really excited. Like, for example, if your parents ever took you to Disneyland, they're like, well, if you're like my parents, they're like, you ain't going on every ride. Like, you got a few rides to choose from because we ain't got the money to go on every single ride. I went to Disneyland once as a kid. And we did it very, very cheap. I think my mom got free tickets. That's the only way we went. But then we get to Thursday. On Thursday, the moon will continue being in Gemini, and it's going to make a square to Neptune. There's going to be still this feeling of overwhelming thoughts and ideas that leads to a confusion. And then the moon will ingress into Cancer, and this is when the energy becomes a lot more low, and it's just about taking care of the personal things. So Thursday seems kind of like, for example, if you're someone like me that drinks a lot of coffee and you get that rush, but then, you start tweaking out by the end of it, and you start feeling like, too much anxiety, too much antsiness. You don't really know where to point your energy towards. That's the vibe with the moon leaving that square to Saturn and then squaring Neptune. It's like, I have all these things, and what do I do? And what's important here is Neptune's retrograde. So now that we're kind of seeing things differently, now we have all this information, those two things are conflicting with one another. And again, we might have had this plan or we wanted to do this thing in the way that we saw it before, but now that things have changed, now we're coming to the confrontation of well, I have all these plans and ideas, but now that the vision's changed a little bit, what do I do from here? And this will feel a little overwhelming. This will feel very confusing. You're just going to have to ride through it. Don't be afraid to go through those emotions. Don't resist that, because those are good questions to ask yourself. But the nice part is by, Thursday, after that happens, the moon will then ingress into Cancer. So this is now the dark moon in Cancer. We're getting ready for the new moon in Cancer. This is lower energy. This is, again, taking care of personal things. Something that I think is really, really important is when you feel really overwhelmed with, everything that's going on in your life. Right now, I'm literally doing so fucking much. I have not had time to do anything. I'm barely getting my priorities handled. I'm barely going grocery shopping. And when I feel very overwhelmed, it's one of those things where it's like, well, for example, let me just do my laundry. Let me just do my dishes. Let me just, again, do things that I know I need to get done that I can't avoid not doing because things just get worse. And it gives me something for my hands to do, and it lets my brain not be occupied by everything else that I've got going on. And this is the new moon that we're getting ready for in Cancer, which we'll talk about, I guess, on Friday. But as the moon is dark here, this is lower energy. We're not supposed to be starting or initiating all of these things. That's for a waxing moon to a full moon. This is a dark moon. This is like, hey, now that we've got all this information, let's readdress, let's re-game plan here. And so then we get to Friday, and Friday has two highlights. It's only those two highlights. We have Mars making a sextile to Saturn, and then we have the new moon in Cancer. That's all we've got going on Friday. And again, those are two highlights. Those are two bigger deals. The way I would really describe it is, I talked a lot about this with Jupiter and Taurus, but slow is smooth and smooth is fast. When it comes to Mars making that sextile to Saturn, Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Mars in Taurus is not about, think about the difference of energy you've had from May, like late April, May, into now June. Mars was in Aries on the North Node for a lot of May. It was like cranking up the energy. It was, I want to do this. I want to do that. I'm going to do all of these things. But as Mars goes into Taurus, there's a lot more of like, well, there's what you want to do and there's what you can do. There's all of the ambition, and then there's like the actual, like, it's easier to say what we want to do in our heads, but then when it actually comes to doing it, there's a lot of stops in the road. There's a lot of, if you want to travel the country, let's say you want to take a road trip across the country, you just look at the map and say, oh, we're going to go from LA to New York. Well, okay, if you're going from LA to New York, you're going to probably take the 15 and you're going to drive through Vegas. Well, there's going to be LA traffic. There's going to be Vegas traffic. Well, what if you're driving through, again, if you're driving through the 70 and you're going through something like Utah and there's a, road closed and you have to go around it. It's like, okay, well, that takes the trip longer. Then you have people going to the bathroom. Then you get a little bit hungry. And then you got to spend the night somewhere. There's all of these things that kind of get in our way that slow us down a little bit, even though we're on our journey, but it's going to go a little bit slow. Journey across the country is a very long time. America is very, very big. And so the way I look at Mars making that sextile to Saturn is, again, coming back to enjoying the present moment. What is nice about Mars in Taurus is, again, being consistent. It's not about starting new things. It's not about changing things. It's about just like being in your zone, doing the thing that you've got to do, being consistent. And I like that it's going to sextile Saturn. Something I wanted to mention, I think I wanted to mention this last week, but the sextile aspect is ruled by Mercury. So let's think about that for a second. If Mercury is kind of about like ideas and thoughts, it's the small planet that kind of just makes quick connections. That's how I like to look at the sextile. It's not like this huge, gift from God to help you on anything. It's just like oh, hey, here's this, like, for example, what makes a long road trip nice is audiobooks, podcasts, music, anything to get into it. And if you're like, if you're an American and you're a kid, we all typically took road trips as kids. And it's like, I remember being a kid and looking out the window and just like letting my imagination just take over, and it just made the time pass. And so I like that from Mars sextiling Saturn and Pisces. And also something for me, I used to talk about this years ago and I haven't brought it up, but like I'm a Sag rising. If there's one thing I live for, it is driving through the desert really, really fast with no one around, blaring music with the windows down, smoking cigarettes. That is like peak Sag energy for me. Mars sextiling Saturn, and the reason I say that is there's a level of like therapy with that. Like sometimes you just need to go. Sometimes you just need to run away. Sometimes you just need to get out of town. And when you're driving and I always look at driving as like a what's the word I'm looking for? Not like, yes, like a therapy, but like a meditation. I forgot what it's called, but when you're seeing the lines and everything's very consistent, there's a certain type of meditation with that. I can't remember what it is. But it is meditative where, because there's this consistent thing going on, you get into a trance state. My bad. Trance is what really it is. And when you're in that trance state, it lets you kind of like just work through things. And that Mars in Taurus sextiling Saturn and Pisces is so that, in my opinion, but not necessarily driving, with the windows down, blaring music like a Sag rising. It's so much more of just kind of like, I want to be in this trance state and like, okay, like I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to be stable. And you know what? This is going to help me work through a lot of those issues. It's one of those, again, I can't talk about this enough, but like doing things with your hands and being occupied in any sort of way, and that could even be like just something like driving, really does help you work through a lot of issues, like subconsciously. And what I like about Mars sextiling Saturn too is, and I'm about to move on to the new moon in Cancer in a second. I know I'm talking a lot about this, but there's just something so like, all right, we're going slow, we're chilling, we're in that consistent path. That's the focus. But this is a sextile to Saturn. There's something about this that's like, oh yeah, I can work through something here. I'm gaining a little bit more connection of what I'm responsible over, of how I need to grow up, how I need to be more mature and disciplined. So I like that. And the new moon in Cancer, what I like about this is a lot of this is about like rehydrating and replenishing yourself. The new moon is not about, taking decisive action on something and beginning something new. It's like, let's get regrounded here. Let's regenerate. After a long day, hiking or working out in the sun, like it's sometimes you just have to take a bath. Like over this past week, I have done a lot of things and I wasn't really getting a good amount of sleep. Last night, I literally passed out on my couch at like 10 p.m. I woke up at like 3 a.m. and then I was like, oh, I need to go to bed. Went to bed, thought I was going to wake up at 6 because of I can only really sleep like 7 hours. I can't sleep any less than that. And I woke up at like 9. So I got like 9, 10, 11 hours of sleep last night. And my body just needed it. And I felt so refreshed. That's the way I look at the new moon in Cancer. It's like, it's just time to rehydrate. Like you're going to feel lower energy. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a time to replenish yourself and rehydrate. And with Mars sextiling Saturn, it's like, enjoy the cruise. We're not going that fast right now. It's okay if we're not going all that fast. Enjoy the moment, refresh yourself, because now we're after the new moon, we're now moving into a waxing phase of the moon. Now things will start to build up after this, but you should take care of yourself during this new moon in Cancer. And then we get to Saturday. I'm really liking Saturday. On Saturday, the moon, while it's in Cancer, getting away from the sun, it's starting to gain in light, is going to make a trine to Saturn. It's going to conjoin Venus. It's going to sextile Mars. Then the moon makes a trine to Neptune. And then the moon goes into Leo and goes opposite Pluto. So the moon's kind of doing a lot here on Saturday, but some of my biggest takeaways is we're gaining energy from after that new moon. Like, let yourself relax on Friday, and then by Saturday, it's time to start getting some more energy going, right? This is making moves and making things happen. The moon's in Cancer. It's going to first make that trine to Saturn. So it's like, okay, let me take care of the big projects. Let me take care of the big thing I know I need to do. And then the moon is going to be conjoining Venus and sextiling Mars, where it's like, let me take care of the fun stuff. Let me actually have some enjoyment with it. And the moon makes that sextile to Mars. It's like, again, we're not going fast here. We're just doing what we can with what we have. And that's totally okay. And then the moon makes a trine to Neptune, where I think this is connecting more with, again, bigger vision, bigger ideas, not being afraid of letting our emotions wander with what things could look like. Then the moon goes into Leo, where this is all about being confident and brave. Like the moon in Leo, it's like, for example, as a guy, nothing makes you feel sexier than getting a haircut. Like there's memes about it online. I can't think of one, but it's just like, you can go from like, and there's actually a barber I keep seeing on my Instagram where he keeps taking these people that look like fucking straight up like school shooters or incels, and then he gives them a haircut and they just look like fuck boys. Like, and you could just see the energy in them just completely change. And that's how I look at like the moon in Cancer, being like, okay, I need to get a haircut. I look like a gross dude. And then the moon goes into Leo, and then you're like, you become toxic and you become a fuckboy, and it's fun. That's how I kind of look at it. Like, encapsulate that energy. And I think you're only going to encapsulate that energy if you go and get the haircut, metaphorically, which is going to be something that you do on Friday. But the moon goes into Leo, and it goes opposite Pluto, where again, there is this a little bit of tension with like fear and power. But the moon's in Leo with Mercury. It's kind of like, let the haters say whatever they want to say. Don't be afraid to join in. Don't be afraid to feel confident and bold. And then we get to Sunday. And on Sundays, when the moon actually conjoins Mercury and sextiles Jupiter, this is so like, again, there's such a different energy. Again, if you've ever like had like a weight transformation, like if you ever, like lost a ton of weight, or you changed your look, and you felt like you went from feeling really insecure to confident, it's like you can just like, as a guy, it's like when I feel like I look really good, it's like I can flirt, I can talk, I'm quick, I'm witty, I'm fun, I'm charming. And that's the vibe on Sunday. Like the moon conjoining Mercury and Leo is being like, yeah, I'm going to say it with my chest. Like I said what I said. What are you going to do about it? And the moon sextiles Jupiter and Gemini. You're funny. You're casual. It's cool. And if we take that more on that personal development level, I think this is why the new moon in Cancer is so important. Like, take care of yourself, replenish yourself, like rehydrate yourself with what you need. And that could look like a lot of different things. And of course, this is going to look very specific to what Cancer rules in your chart. But as we get to Sunday, I think this is like, it's one of those things where you're just kind of cocky, and that attitude is good. Like, I would rather you be cocky and overconfident than insecure and beat yourself up, because at least if you're cocky and confident, you inspire other people to be cocky and confident, unless they're haters. But then also too, they just hate you because they're projecting what they wish they were onto you, and they get mad at you rather than themselves. Then beating yourself up and being whack, because I don't want to be around whack people that just beat themselves up all day long and think they're not good enough. Like, you are good enough. Like, talk like it, act like it. If you're gonna like walk the walk. So that's how I look at Sunday. And I think on Sunday, this is powerful as we start going into next week, because next week we're going to have Venus in Cancer make a sextile to Uranus. That's fun. We still have the Venus in Cancer vibe, but then Venus goes into Leo. And so now we're shifting from all of the water stuff to the fire stuff. So this watery time, this deep emotional stuff is good. When we get to the fire energy, that's when you get to be a little bit more confident, a little bit more brave. And that's where I think you're going to be able to like have a lot more energy and motivation to do everything. Like, again, right now, everything's very watery and earthy. When we start getting to like the end of July and August, everything gets kind of fire and air. And that's really good. Like, or I should say that's the difference between yin energy and yang energy. Right now we need to be more yin. Right now we need to be more internal. Right now we need to be doing the private stuff. And then next month we could start being a lot more in people's faces, feeling confident, making moves. That makes sense. And that's what I got for you guys this week. If you are listening to this on Apple or on Spotify, please give me a 5-star review. I never ask for that because I always forget that I have this on Spotify. And if you want to listen to this on Spotify instead of YouTube, hey, that's an option available. But just do me a favor and give me 5 stars. I'd really appreciate a review from you guys as well. Comment below. Let me know what you're looking forward to, what you're ready for. Like this video. It does help me out. And subscribe. We got a lot more great content on the way. So with that being said, I'll be seeing you guys next week.